New at 10 o'clock, the Quincy Police Department hosts a beat meeting tonight for the city's southwest side. It's part of ongoing efforts to meet with residents throughout the city. Tonight's meeting was for residents who live south of Broadway and west of 18th Street. They turned out to meet officers, learn more about what's happening in their neighborhoods, and report any issues. The goal of these meetings is to better connect law enforcement with the community.
For the individual beat residents to meet their beat officers. So I think that a partnership between the police department and the community is vital to success and a safe community. And this is one good way to establish those partnerships.
And QPD has another beat meeting planned in a different part of the city before the end of this year.